Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over the June stats for Kill Team, covering all the stats for the past month of June, as well as an updated Q2 stats look at to see what factions maybe Games Workshop hit or missed based on the balanced data slate. But before we get into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. Do you like the stats? Anything we missed? That kind of stuff. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, an affiliate link at Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support as well. So yeah, once again, we're back with the monthly stats show for Kill Team, one of the most accurate places and consistent places to do stats. But the other thing is, once again, all our stats are collated from the Best Coast Pairings app by Smiles Lies Gunfire, and none of this would be possible without him, so all thanks goes to that. Goes to him. And if you aren't using Best Coast Pairings, you can submit your event to either me or Smiles Lies and Gunfire via my Discord, and then we can just add your event anyway. But that's why there may be some discrepancies, because we only use Best Coast Pairings. The other thing is, for article versions going forward, I'll be linking Smiles Lies and Gunfire's website. So we now have the stats live in a public format. The only thing is the site will be updated after I do the video. So basically, once I've done the video, then the stats will be updated on the website, but it's all public and you can play around with it just as you like. And it's all done by Smiles, Lies and Gunfire. So please check out. It's a really great resource that you can all use. So first things first is we have the list of events for June with the world map. So obviously America had the most events at 43, with 5 GT Plus events with the most players with 398 players. Very good there. Spain had 16 events with 262 players. And then the UK had 6 events with 135 players. And then Russia behind them, as well as Argentina. You know, Russia with 123 players, Argentina with 74. Notably, I'm afraid Australia has sunk again, even though Australia had 6 events with 35 players. New Zealand has managed to sink Australia, so but Australia still exists, just not on this map. So starting off with the June win rates. Remember, this is the first month where we've got Mandrakes, no, it's not Mandrakes, sorry, Brood Brothers and Harnkin Jaegers live. So they've had about 2 weeks of stats for the month of June. And well, it's quite interesting. So as you can see from the table, remember 55 to 45% is good, above 55% is bad, and below 45% is bad. So currently, with 40 games, our top performers are Inquisition, Inquisitorial Agents with a 63% win rate, which is very good, but with a low number of games. Then we have Wormblade with a decent number of games at 136 with a 60% win rate. So they're doing very well for June. Mandrakes with 306 games have a 60% win rate, which is totally fine. Totally fine. Mandrakes, totally fine. Brood Brother with 122 games, they only have a 59% win rate. Clearly, absolutely fine as well. Harnkin Jaegers, all right, so they only have 52 games, but they have a 57% win rate, which is like, it's interesting. I'll get more into it later, but I've actually been speaking to Shane from Command Point quite a lot. I've played a few Harnkin Jaeger, both against and as, and I think they're actually pretty good. I was expecting them to actually hit around 50, 55, them hitting 57. I'm not too surprised, but it's actually quite good to see, because this faction I think is pretty good. It's just Harnkin Salvagers mess them up. Pathfinders with 57% and 143 games. It's fine. And then Galapox on 56% with 121 games. But we all have Galapox. And then Felgor Ravager at 56% as well with 160 games. Star Striders as well at 56% with 120 games. So Star Strider's actually picking up in popularity. Then going down to below 55, some notable mentions are Nemesis Claw and Exaction Squad, both doing fairly well from their win rate, with Nemesis Claw being the most popular faction in the game right now with 454 games, which is very, very good. Exaction Squad a little bit lower at 64, but still I think that's their best performance yet. Then Void Dancer Troop, they're down to 33 games, but they have a decent win rate as well. Blades of Cain, perfectly balanced at 50% with 105 games. But when we go below to outer performing teams, unfortunately, we have Legionary at 43%. Then we have Kazakin at 43%. with 100 games, whereas Legionary had 217. Farstalker Kinband at 41.67%, and then Compendium averaging at 40, and then Scouts, we'll just respect this for Scouts at 37.5, well, 38%. Right, this is the last time we'll see Scouts at this level of win rate, so we better just bask in it now. And here's the bar chart for everyone to see with everything rounded up, as I've said. So as you can see, Inquisition at the top, 63%. We have a lot of overperforming factions for June, unfortunately, but we have a large majority of factions doing well, and then we only have 5 underperforming factions for the month. Well, 4 if you exclude Compendium. So we have more overperforming factions, but we have consistent underperformers. Maybe Legionary will pick up now that they've had that buff, you know, with their roster change. But I don't expect Kazakin or Farstalker Kinband to change. And Scouts, this is probably the last time we'll see Scouts at 38%, so enjoy it while you can. So then once again, I'll quickly show up the placement and performance data. So here's the faction breakdown for the placements in terms of numbers form. So you've got the placements and podiums up there. And when it comes to overall for the June placement data, we actually saw Intercession win a lot of events. They actually podiumed 16 times. They won 14 events, and they had a decently high ratio of players going at least 3 wins, 1 loss, which is like, this has basically been, from a tournament perspective, Intercession's best month in a long time since they got nerfed. No idea why, but it's nice to see. Then we have Mandrakes. They won 11 events with 26 podiums and went 3-1 27 times. Nemesis Claw actually only won 9 events, but they podiumed 23 times. Pathfinders also won 9 events, podium 13 times. Commandos won 7. Wormblade won 6. Corsairs won 5. And as we go down, Brood Brothers actually only won 4 events, but they podiumed 9 times, which is really good there. And then also Hierotech won 3 events. Going down, the only factions to not win events this month were Starstriders, Blooded, Harkin Jaegers, Chaos Cult, and Legionary. But overall, a decent spread. And as I previously mentioned, Intercession dominating the tournament scene this month. For placement rates, as you can see, it's fairly evenly matched for most factions until it comes to like Exaction. So Exaction had a higher rate, a higher percentage of 3-1s with a decent placement percentage, but most factions are fairly evenly matched. I think it only really spikes with Wormblade and Mandrakes because they're both very popular factions, and you know, they're just very powerful. Felgor also had a high number of factions, players going 3-1, but not as closely correlated to their podiuming, which is interesting. And even you can see on Hand of the Archon, they didn't really place too well at events, but most of their players went 3-1, which is very good. Looking at GT Plus, so remember these are events with 4 or more rounds and 16 or more players. Brood Brothers with 40 games, because all their games turned out to be in GT Plus, were the best with 66%, which is fine. It's fine. It's only their first month. I'm sure it will come down. Inquisition with 25 games had a 66% win rate as well. Wormblade with 64 games had a 63% win rate. Harkin Jaeger with 20 games had a 63% win rate. Mandrakes with 113 games had 60%. Pathfinders on 58. Starstriders on 57. Blades of Cain going up to 57 with 37 games at GT Plus. And then Halfkin at 56 with Gelapox and Felgor all at 56 as well. Then we have most factions middling out. But when we go to factions going under 45%, we actually have Corsairs with 43%, well, 44%. Warp Coven on 40. Blooded down to 40. Justian at 39. Chaos Cult at 39 with 23 games. Farstalker Kinband at 38. And then Scouts at 31. So we have quite a big swing there. And as you can see from the graph, compared to normal win rates, we've actually got a very more, where like the range of healthy factions has dropped quite considerably, where we have a wider number of factions underperforming and slightly more factions overperforming. The only other factions that start overperforming are really novitiates, Whereas when you look at underperforming factions, we've got a lot more, but it makes sense considering there weren't that many events this month. And then once again, here's all the chart information for the placement data for GT+. So for GT+ podiums for June, Intercession had the most with 3 event wins. Very good there. They also podiumed 4 times. Then we could see Mandrakes, they won 2 events with 8 podiums. And Pathfinders won 2 events along with Commandos and Vetguard. So Vetguard and Commandos still winning quite tough events despite their lower win rates. Wormblade, Halfkin, Galapox, Brood Brothers, Felgor, Kazakin, Blades of Kain and Corsairs all won 1 event as well. But also you can see how their lower representation has showed they had lower podiums. The players who won those factions were the only factions, well, the only players to podium with that faction at GT+. And then we had, well, if you look at Nemesis Claw, they won no large events, but they had 5 podiums, and then they had the highest spike of players going 3-1 or better. So very good to see there for that faction, very healthy. And as you can see in the placement rates, as I covered, the placement percentage is how well a faction places compared to the event. It's like the top 10% of each event they play in. And as you can see, once again, it's mostly an even match until you come to Wormblade, Mandrakes, and then even Harnkin Jaeger. Right, so they had a higher number of players going 3-1 compared to placing, and Exaction and Legionary have very strange results when it comes to GT+. So now we go to GT Long. So GT Long are events with 6 or more rounds and 30 or more players. So there was only one event this month, which was GT Long, which was mine, the Goonhammer Open in the UK in Leicester. So we've also excluded factions with 10 or less games because it just was not reliable. So it does look more skewy. Like we have basically factions who had like not even, it was under 5 games basically. So there's a lot less factions because some factions had a lot of factions weren't represented at the Goonhammer Open. So first up we had Novitiates with only 12 games at GT Long with a 75% win rate. Brood Brothers, where 24 games at GT Long with a 75% win rate. As an interesting fact, in GT Long, if you exclude the mirror matches, they actually jump up to an 84% win rate. It's actually very funny and depressing because at my event, Brood Brothers only lost to, apart from themselves, they lost to 1 Felgor and 1 Novitiates. So if you remove their mirrors, they go up to 84%, which is, I'm sure, fine. Felgor at 58%, Commandos at 58%, Wormblade at 58% as well. And then also we have, for underperforming factions, oddly Mandrakes, they did not do well at GT Long. Then we have Blooded down to 33%, Legionary down to 33%, Justian at 25%, and the Nemesis Claw at 21%. Because there were only 2 players of the Nemesis Claw in my event. So kind of interesting that this is just basically unintentionally only reviewing my event. So it's the only month it's happened. But GT Long is an interesting look because, as I said, it's the more competitive format. It's more skewy, but it's very interesting just to see these kind of results. And here's the chart, you know, the nice bar chart. So we only have 16 factions and it's quite even. We basically have 5 underperforming factions, 5 overperforming factions, and 6 factions which are fine. Big spikes, but GT Long it's better when we have more events. It's just the first time we've only had 1 event for June. And then once again, this is all the placement data for GT Long. It's not going to be much because, as I said, it's just my event, but you've got the factions and everything there. So for the GT Long placement data, we have Brood Brothers who won the Goonhammer Open and 2 of their players out of 4 podiumed, both having the same 3-1 ratio. And then Novitiates, they podiumed as well because they came third at the Goonhammer Open. And then we could see Wormblade and Mandrakes also had the next highest 3-1 ratio. But otherwise, there you go. You know, there you go. Nice spread there. And then for the placement rates, we had Pathfinders who placed in the top percentage with 4 wins and 2 losses. And then we had Brood Brothers, Novitiates and Wormblade effectively tied in a dead heat. Then we have the Compendium data. So overall, you can see Bespoke averaging out at 52%, Grey Knights at 46%, High Fleet at 43%, Talons of the Emperor at 42%, Death Guard at 41%, Imperial Guard at 35%, Space Marines and Ecclesiarchy at 25% each. And then also their placement data, where we actually had Talons of the Emperor win an event. They were the only Compendium team to win an event, which is notable there. but it was an 8-round event. But still, good that they've aged well. Then we have the performance table for June. So once again, this is averaging all the stats to try and get basically a holistic picture to show how each faction is performing overall, to show which is best for you. We've reduced some factions from this just based on overall rates, but it should be a nice competitive average. And as you can see, for June, the performance chart is quite interesting. Technically, Wormblade are the best performing faction overall when it comes to performance, because they have a very high usage with decent number of event wins, placing well in events, as well as very likely to go at least 3 wins and 1 loss. So very good Wormblade at the moment. Mandrake's also incredibly good this month, doing a similar amount, except only really underperforming when it came to GT Long. Pathfinder's rocking it up in terms of like very high win rate with performance. So this is pre-nerf, so it might come down a bit. Then you have Star Striders and Novitiates doing pretty well, actually. Felgor with actually a lower win rate, but a decent placing rate. And then you have Nemesis Claw Commandos and Galapox on the positive side, but kind of average when it comes to placement. So they're very likely to go at least 3-1 and place highly at event, but not likely to win an event. Then you've got Phobos kind of near the middle. And then as we look to the left-hand side, Intercession and Vet Guard occupying this weird spot where they have a low win rate, but actually very high performance placement in terms of how they're actually winning events. So interesting there. And then down at the bottom, we basically have Blooded having a really bad month, oddly, and then Farstalker Kinband. Like, Hyrotech also dropped off this month, which is kind of worrying because they just technically got nerfed really hard. And these are all the events for June, just showing how we got that information. And then finally, I'll go quickly over the updated Q2 stats. So this time I'll just go over the general win rates and that's it, because there wasn't too much added. So as you can see, Brood Brothers rocking out at the end of the meta on 65% from 86 games, which is actually pretty decent, but it's their first month. Felgor at 56% on 160 games, nearly 600 games. Galapox with nearly 400 games on 56%. Then we have Mandrakes on 56 with nearly, over 700 games. Pathfinders at 55% on 550 games, Inquisition at 55 and Wormblade at 55. Then as we go down, underperforming factions, we only really have Kroot with 43%, Kazakin at 42% and Scouts at 39%. And once again, here's all the information for updated Q2 in bar chart form. So interestingly, going off of that, technically there are several factions that should have been technically hit according to the balance data slate if they followed the stats. So namely, basically Galapox and just Galapox really. So Wormblade are just in the acceptability range of fine. So it's very interesting. Underperforming factions are where it's quite contentious, because clearly Farstalker, Kinban and Kazakin should have been buffed and they weren't. Legionary actually averaged out on 47%, and they're doing, this will probably bump them up to 50, which is nice. And then, as I say, Scouts, slightly, last time we'll see them at 39%. Everyone just enjoy this. This is the last time we can enjoy Scouts at 39%. It's fine. It's all fine. So overall, for June, we actually had a very interesting month. We had basically like 1 week, maybe 2 weeks of the New Balance data slate. Actually, it would have only been one. Ignore me. So overall, it's going to be quite weird. Hyrotech weren't doing well. I mean, they were fine. They were just like near 50%, but this might make them drop off. Pathfinders, I think they'll stay the same. You know, we are effectively, my gosh, so many Mandrakes and Nemesis Claw. Brood Brothers actually doing really well, considering they had 86 games in 2 weeks, which is wild, completely wild. Then even Honkin' Jaegers doing quite well. Hopefully that maintains, because I could see them dropping down to the 55 to 45% range. I think that's good. Honkin' Jaegers, I think, are still a really good faction, which people aren't really respecting, and you'll find out why when you play them and lose to them. Galapox still doing well. We had Star Striders doing really well this month. Blooded kind of dropped off a bit, but they were still okay. Kroot and Kazakin unfortunately did really badly, and I don't think that will change. Then we've got Scouts. Literally, Scouts the worst performing faction in the game. but they won't be from, they're not anymore. Just so many scouts, so many shotguns and knives. And then overperforming factions, Inquisitor agents, I think are going to be a really good pick, and a pick we'll see more often, because I think they do quite well into Blooded and Mandrakes, considering Mandrakes, my gosh, are everywhere with Nemesis Claw. And then Brood Brothers are going to be a rising threat as well. Wormblade doing really well overall too. They're consistently a solid pick. Gallowpox are kind of weird. Like, if you can survive turning point 1, they're great. But as the stats have shown, they have a decent win rate, but they're not really winning events. They're just placing well. They're usually losing these odd rounds, which stops them winning an event. Whereas we haven't seen that with Wormblade and Inquisition, who have been quite consistent winning. Also, shout outs to Intercession, who have had a really good month over a spread of events. It's not like they were just winning 3-round events with 8 players. They were actually winning a lot of events that were GT Plus as well, 4-round events. So it wasn't just them even winning in one area. This is like a global thing, because I believe people forget how tanky Intercession can be and how they oddly counter a lot of good factions at the moment just because of their 14 wounds and consistent damage. It should be an interesting month going forwards. I think for July, we're going to see a lot more Brood Brother, definitely. Jaeger, we should see a bit more. Hopefully they took up a bit. Obviously, Scouts are just going to be everywhere. I still think Wormblade will be a big threat. Exaction are probably going to get a bit of a boost, considering they did really well this month at 53%. So overall, the stats have been interesting. When we look at the Q3 stats, clearly the balanced stage slate should have buffed Kroot and Fast Talker, Kinban and Kazakin. It's a kind of shame it didn't there. And it looks like they probably should have touched Gallowpox slightly, and probably Wormblade and Inquisition. So if you play any of those 3 factions, you're smiling. You're having the time of your life. It's great. Great to be alive. But remember, before I go, if you want to check out the stats, they'll be in the episode description below on the official website by Smiles, Lies and Gunfire, who I couldn't do this without. So please thank him if you see him. He's really cool, and that website will have all the stats you can play around with as well. But that's pretty much it from me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of the stats today. Do you like them? You know, anything we could improve upon? Let us know. We like tweaking based on feedback. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, an affiliate element games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. And I'll quickly shout out my patrons. So for my adepts of the crew, I have Willax, Turn Zero Gaming, Tom, Supercow, Sam, Nick, Mercenary Q, John Thomas, Graham, Freeman, Dad of Goldens, and then for my veterans of the crew, I have Sam. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me today. 2 videos, very tired. You know, I've got a nice haircut. I got it for the Goonhammer Open, which was really fun. Hopefully I'm going to try and run more events, but the stats are interesting. Right, I need to link up with Dakota. We need to do like a combined Super Saiyan fusion of the stats, you know, break the meta with our stats coverage. But it's interesting. I think it's very strange that really Fast Talker, Kinban and Kroot, well, Fast Talker, Kinban and Kazakin didn't get buffed. I think that's the biggest thing. I really do like Harkin Jaeger, but I think the biggest thing with Harkin Jaeger is, my gosh, the Halfkin Salvager matchup is horrible, but it's always fun to look at the stats. I don't think we should use them as a sole source of balance, but they're a good litmus check. I think where the game is at the moment, they're a good 50-50 balance with player and playtester feedback, as well as game dev feedback and opinion. But I need to start doing the video I said I'll do on the wide number of factions we have, because it's, at the moment, it's okay, but when we go into GT Plus, and especially into GT Long, we do not have the player base to support all these factions, but that's something I'll get onto later. But remember, no matter what the stats say, you always have a chance to win, as long as you can roll a crit.